My friends, I'm Big Z from LoreStar, and today I wanted to address the looping controversy that has been snowballing since last year. Namely, the controversy surrounding the practice of bringing animated characters into live action and the disparity in appearance between their live action and animated representations. With how poorly some of these transitions are being handled, some fans are going so far as to say that Disney Lucasfilm should abandon the practice altogether, saying that this is just another Kathleen Kennedy cash grab. And with Grand Admiral Thrawn and Ezra Bridger set to debut in the Ahsoka series, does this spell imminent doom for those characters? What should be done about this, and what does this mean for Star Wars titles going forward? All of that and more today. By the way, just a quick note, but my newest game review is up on my Gimme page. This month it is for Mass Effect 2, so click the link in the description to check that out. Gimme is a great website where you guys can talk to me and ask questions directly about some of my favorite video games and other things beyond the world of Star Wars. Anyway, back to the main topic. This video is going to represent the controversy, starting off relatively impartially, or at least as impartially as I can, and will progress just into my opinions of all of this. I'll probably just have some game footage overlaying over this, just so that you guys can have something to look at while you listen to the facts, evidence, and my rambling opinions. So, bringing characters into live action, the most controversial entries in this have been the Grand Inquisitor from the most recent Kenobi trailer, the fifth brother also in the Kenobi trailer, Cad Bane in Book of Boba Fett, and Ahsoka in Book of Boba and The Mandalorian. I'll be talking about all of these more deeply later, but basically each of these characters had poor reception because there were some pretty stark visual differences between the way they were represented in live action and how they were introduced in their various animated series. A counterpoint that seems to come up a lot is that, well, the animated series does take creative liberties with the visual representation. After all, Dooku does look like some sort of angry bird man in the Clone Wars animated series, when of course the late great Sir Christopher Lee looked absolutely nothing like predatory poultry. However, one of the things that a lot of these people tend to forget is that even though there have been visual creative liberties taken, there's also a really strong push to maintain integrity between the way their voices sound. Most of the characters, the voice actors that were chosen to play those characters in the Clone Wars animated series were chosen because they sounded somewhat like, or could at least make themselves sound like, the actual actors who played those characters in live action. And so that seems to actually be a bigger deal for me, is how the characters sound more than what they look like. But we're going to get into my thoughts more later. I just wanted to build up on that. Now, also, for the sake of fairness, I do want to address the times they've got it right. Saw Gerrera was the first character from animated canon to be brought into live action. Well, unless you count General Grievous, but still Grievous was created for the movies. He wasn't created for the 2D Clone Wars animated feature. He was just put into that in order to introduce him for the movie, so I actually don't count Grievous. And Saw Gerrera's look was still pretty different from when we last saw him in the Clone Wars and then when we saw him in Rogue One, but much of this is explained away by the decades of war endured by Gerrera in the 20 years he spent between these two stories. Man, remember when Rogue One came out and all we had to worry about was the fact that Saw Gerrera didn't have green eyes? It was a simpler time. But anyway, other materials such as Jedi Fallen Order and Star Wars Rebels have done a lot to bridge the gap between his appearance in Clone Wars and Rogue One, giving us a sort of progression of the change in his appearance. So at least that one is explained away. Even more accurate, and surprisingly so, was the unexpected appearance of Chopper in Rogue One, who carried with him great consistency between Rebels, the animated series, and his appearance in the live-action Rogue One. That said, he is a droid, and droids tend to have a much better track record, such as the BD-style droid as introduced in Jedi Fallen Order, and then appearing in the Book of Boba Fett as a droid serving Peli the Mechanic. Also, the Dark Troopers were first introduced in the Dark Empire comics, later adapted into security droids in Star Wars Rebels, and finally brought to completion in their live-action appearance in The Mandalorian. There are also the Pikes as a species who appeared maskless in live action for the first time in the Book of Boba Fett after being introduced in the animated Clone Wars series. Bo-Katan is another great example, carrying the same voice actor who played her in the Clone Wars and Rebels, and her look is very consistent and carried over quite well into live action. The same could be said for Hondo Ohnaka. Even though Hondo hasn't actually appeared live action in a film, his live action appearance has already been determined and placed into the Smuggler's Run ride in Galaxy's Edge found in Disneyland and Walt Disney World Resort. And since I am counting the comics, Black Chrysanthemum and Ray Sloane are also great examples of characters whose appearance has great fidelity between their original comic interpretation and the way they were represented in future materials. Even though Ray Sloane has never appeared in live action, I would count her appearance in Star Wars Squadrons campaign to be indicative of what she would look like in live action. Still, there is a rebuttal to be said concerning the controversial characters that I listed at the beginning of this video. First is the Grand Inquisitor. The Grand Inquisitor looks absolutely nothing like his Rebels appearance, but again, people will always go back to that argument of, well, the creative liberties and so on and so forth, but the Grand Inquisitor is a Pauan. It's not just that he doesn't look like the Inquisitor from Rebels, he doesn't even look Pauan. We know what Pauans look like. We have seen them in live action, and this is not it. Here is literally the first sentence on the Wikipedia page entry for Pauans. Pauans are gaunt, long-limbed humanoids from Utapau. Gaunt. By the way, let's not forget the Lucasian nightmare from which Pauan teeth must have originated. These aren't Pauan teeth. That isn't a gaunt Pauan. That looks like something completely different. There is no real rebuttal for the fifth brother since we don't even know what species he is. And while we can say, is it consistent with the animated? No. Does it look repulsively stupid? Absolutely. But without a reference point for what his species is supposed to look like in live action, I'd be hard-pressed to say more. Now, Cad Bane is a Duros. We do know his species, and we know what Duros look like. But then animated Bane didn't look terribly much like a Duros either. One small thing I can say, however, is that they really tried hard to give Cad Bane Duros fingers, which is great, except they look weird in the close-ups of his hands for the duel. And what's more, they didn't have to give him Duros fingers since Cad Bane most often wore gloves, so yeah, they should have just given him gloves, honestly. I mean, they could have still made the fingers a little bit more bulbous at the end, but they wouldn't have had to try so hard to make them look alien when you could have left it to the imagination under his black-brown leather gloves. And Ahsoka. Well, we've been over this in other videos, but to put it short, Ahsoka's monstrals look prepubescent in The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. This is great in The Clone Wars because she is prepubescent, but we saw in Rebels that she was a fully grown and matured Togruta. The monstrals we see in The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett are not the monstrals of a fully grown 45-year-old Togruta. Yes, it's a problem that we've seen them fully developed in Rebels, but this is just biologically inconsistent with the species. So what is Disney Lucasfilm to do, then? I mean, the three most recent characters to be adapted from animated to live action have all been the center of negative press. And I get it, negative press is punchy and it gets views. I mean, look what I'm doing right here. Plus, some of these changes are just straight up bad. But I don't want them to stop trying altogether, and here's why. You see, I care more about the integrity of the writing more than the costumes and the prosthetics. And after the writing, the next most important thing to me would be the voice. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Ahsoka and the Grand Inquisitor are both massive failures in this department, the voice department. Just absolutely massive. I mean, Ashley Eckstein is Ahsoka to most fans, and no one can top the stunning vocal performance of Jason Isaacs as the Grand Inquisitor. Can I just say for a moment how amazing it would have been to have cast Jason Isaacs as the Inquisitor? The way he looks in real life is way more true to the gaunt, limber appearance of the Inquisitor that we see in Rebels. I get that he'd be more expensive as a bigger actor, but this is Star Wars. Seriously, it is one of the biggest and most frontline movie franchises of all time. You can pay Jason Isaacs to be the Grand Inquisitor for 8 episodes of Kenobi. And let's be real, he's not going to be in every episode for, you can even say 4 or 5 episodes of Kenobi. I mean, come on. I know Star Wars has made a decided effort to avoid casting big-name actors for their roles, but Jason Isaacs already is the Inquisitor. I mean, come on. As for Bane, some people noted that Bane didn't sound much like his character in the Clone Wars, but he did sound much more similar to his representation in The Bad Batch. Anyway, rant about voices aside, I'm more hoping with the Inquisitor that they stay true to the character, his posture, his calculated demeanor, his refined and confident presence. Cad Bane is a great example of this. His visual appearance spurred memes all across the internet, but at least he sounded and acted like Cad Bane. Personally, given the option between the two, I would rather have that, a Cad Bane that doesn't look perfect, but at least he acts like Bane, than to have no live-action Bane at all. Yes, I wish he looked better, but still, I really enjoyed feeling his presence opposite to Boba, and I anticipate feeling much the same way about the Grand Inquisitor, albeit it will be more difficult without having his voice at least sound somewhat similar. While I want them to be a little bit more faithful to the source material, ultimately I would rather just have the character present. Just please be consistent on the voices and species biology. Make your Powans gaunt, and give your Togruta fully developed monstrals. But anyway, I want to know what you guys think about these controversies, so let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, because as always, I want to know what you, my friends, have to say about our favorite galaxy far, far away. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, or if you learned absolutely nothing new, you can feel free to leave a thumbs down completely guilt-free, because that tells me I'm not doing my job. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, may the lore be with you, now and forever.